Alcohol, cocaine, prescription pills, legal and illegal, have become the curse of contemporary civilization. Most frightening, perhaps, is the high degree of substance abuse among doctors, police, lawyers, and pilots. Those professionals in whose hands we unquestioningly place our trust and often our lives. But these men and women, society's caretakers, are human also. They disappear in a crowd just as you and I. But an amazing number are vulnerable to this terrible disease that will place the people they serve in danger, destroy their loved ones, and eventually kill them if they don't reach out for help.
I'm Dr. Michael Myers. The Substance Abuse Center I direct treats people from all walks of life. 12% of our population, 18 million Americans, are addicted. This program, however, will focus on the disease of alcohol and drug addiction as it affects doctors, lawyers, police, and pilots, those who have dedicated themselves to the society's well-being. We face an ugly statistic. The incidence of the disease among these groups is proportionally higher than in the general population. Their great sense of responsibility, the public image attached to their license, the badge, for many reasons, these professionals feel they have more at stake than the average person for disguising and denying their illness. During this hour, we want to show the families, colleagues, and friends of the addicted, and perhaps the addicted themselves, that both health and happiness are possible for those whose future may now seem hopeless. Dr. Garrett O'Connor is the director of Repair, a chemical dependency treatment center.
The disease concept of addiction, is it a disease? That's the basic question. Most people don't believe it's a disease. They say it is, and they say they believe it is, but deep down they believe it's a moral bankruptcy, a terrible characterological deficiency, a sort of fundamental badness in the person, a weakness in their character, something like that. But all the evidence, on the other hand, genetic, physiological, anatomical, and otherwise, points to the fact that addiction really is a disease.
If a police officer is caught using illegal drugs, he's dismissed from the force. Fortunately, most police departments in the country now have programs in place to treat the abuse of legal drugs, alcohol, and prescription pills. An officer need not lose his badge if he's gotten into rehabilitation in time. Detective Bill Martin runs the substance abuse program for the 8,000-man force in Los Angeles. It's a big job.
Drug and alcohol abuse costs the citizens of Los Angeles hundreds of millions of dollars every year. That takes the form of stolen vehicles, lost lives, lost productivity, and all the various drug-related crimes. We recruit from the same society that the rest of the world does, and we have a small number of officers on the department that do have a problem with chemical addictions, such as alcoholism.
I joined the Los Angeles Police Department at the age of 25. It was back in 1981. To be accepted with the boys, I'd go out drinking with them each night. And I found myself spending up to $180 a night drinking with the guys. And I felt if I go home and drink alone by myself, I could save myself a lot of money, and found myself doing that. So I was drinking a liter of tequila a night, combination of beer, and I never thought I had a drinking problem. I was home alone, and my tolerance level just progressed more and more. I drank more and more booze. I met a girl that I had known before I got into the academy and fell in love with her. And one particular night I was drinking excessively, and I arrived to her place, and I was taking my weapon out of my shoulder holster and had an accidental discharge. And the result of that was a fatality. She died 2 or 3 days later after the shooting. And it was frightening, but at the same time, I still didn't think I had a drinking problem. The guilt was overbearing. I just couldn't do anything to prevent the guilt from just eating at me like a cancer. And a lot of friends were telling me, it was okay. It was an accident, which I was aware of, but I mean, being a principal in this whole thing, taking someone's life, no one could say anything to me to make me feel otherwise, and that bottle was my reassurance that I was a knucklehead. I was involved in a traffic accident where I went across the double yellow lines and ran into two vehicles northbound on Highland Boulevard in Hollywood, and striking two vehicles which were occupied at the time. Again, I was so drunk and I was so high I didn't know if I had caused another death. And that's when I reached my bottom. And while I was there at the hospital, at the station, Detective Martin came by and he asked if I needed help. And I told him yes, I did. He said, what was my drink of preference? I said, tequila. He said, well, I can help you that way if that's the kind of help you want. You want another bottle? I told him no, and I meant that from the bottom of my heart. I was placed in the hospital that same morning, and I was there for 32 days. And I was there with coke addicts, heroin addicts, and here I am, a cop. And I look down at these people because these are people that I was putting in jail for the last 3 or 4 years. And I wasn't one of them until we started having these discussions, these meetings. And it's weird. I realized that I, too, was an addict. That was March 25th. That was almost 4 years ago, and at this time I'm going on 4 years of continuous sobriety. Since I've been sober, I feel like my whole life, I owe it to the department. There's guys and girls on this job that you see them every day and you speak to each other and you shuck and jive throughout the station and you crack jokes, but when you're in that desperate need of help, they were there. And I feel I owe them a lot. I owe this department a great deal.
Besides dealing with addiction among fellow officers, Detective Bill Martin regularly instructs cadets on the symptoms of the disease.
I put my partner's life on the line lots of times, lots of times. You don't want to work with somebody like me unless they're in recovery like I am today. You need to hear that. It's terribly important. You're going to work with somebody like me somewhere in your career. What we're going to show you this morning is how to find somebody like me. In the first 12 years that I was a cop here, you could have put me in jail every single workday for drunk or worse. Now, how the heck can I pull that off? I'll tell you how I pulled that off. I came from a dysfunctional family system. Violence is what I grew up in. Screaming and yelling and things flying through the air was normal for me, including me flying through the air. My dad used to close fist punch me with sufficient force as a grade schooler to get me to the ceiling, the wall, and then the floor. That's the kind of life-threatening child abuse I went through. It taught me some stuff. It taught me how to lie, because I had to get past my old man. When he came through that door at night, I had to read him like a book. When I first drank, I drank 2.5 cans, and I could feel the effect of the 2.5 cans. Within 6 months, it was taking a 6-pack or 2 to get the same feeling. And by the time I'd been drinking a year, it would take a case or 2 to get the same feeling. Do you see the increase in tolerance? You see that? Then I had a problem. My bladder was interfering with my drinking. I couldn't pour enough beer in and pee it out fast enough to get high. So I had to switch over to hard liquor. The medical testing they did in 1968 when I came on the department didn't find me. My belief today is if they had tested me today with the testing procedures they have today, they'd have found me. But they didn't find me, and I came to this place in October of 1968, and as you know, there is nothing flat in Legion Park, right? You bet. Running these hills with the hangovers I used to have was a real bitch. It was not fun. Man, I had axes splitting my head, and I had to vomit right here all the time. I had to start manipulating the academy staff, and I had to start manipulating my classmates from the first day. Another symptom I want you to see, manipulation. What happened was I got logical answers for everything that was going wrong. When I didn't finish in the front of the pack, and I never finished in the front of the pack, I made sure everybody knew I was 28, not 21. I was the old man in the class. It made sense that I came in near the end of the pack. You see the logic in that? The fact of the matter is I was too drunk to finish in the front of the class. The bottom line to what happened for me was I went out one afternoon on a Saturday to do a death investigation in the south end of town. Now at this point I'm back to drinking very heavily, a quarter to a day. I'm back to doing some pills during the day so you couldn't smell me so much. Okay, clearly, absolutely clearly dysfunctional, yet I appeared functional. I went out on a death investigation where some person had a baby that was screaming and they wouldn't shut up, and the way they shut the baby up was to grab the baby by its ankles and hit its head on the sink until its brains fell out. Okay, so I go out and I investigate this thing. Remember, I'm an abused child. I walk in here, I wanted to eat that man's face. You know, I had to be professional. We took him away, and the black and white came and took him off to jail. I went home from that crime scene that day emotionally depressed from what I'd seen and the personal hookup that I'd had with that, and medically depressed because of the pills and alcohol I ingested. That's my fault. And when I got home that afternoon, instead of putting my gun up on the shelf where I usually did, I shoved it in my mouth. I had become everything I swore I'd never be. I was fat. I was abusive to my kids. I mean, I beat them to death emotionally. I didn't hurt them physically or sexually, but I beat them to death emotionally. I hurt them. I can't take that back. I did that. I'd become everything I swore I'd never be. I was overweight. I was nasty. I was a drunk. I couldn't stand myself in the mirror. It got to the point when I looked in the mirror and I was trying to shave, I'd cut myself with my razor because I couldn't look at myself. I had to buy an electric razor to shave to go to work. That's where I was. I couldn't stand me anymore. I wanted to kill a person in the mirror and I couldn't do anything. Nothing was available to me. That afternoon I put the gun in my mouth and I was going to blow my brains all over the wall. If that was my bottom, it scared me to death. I finally figured out that for the 22 years I've been using pills and alcohol addictively, that my life was a mess. And that's the first time it ever occurred to me. What I did next was to get a hold of one of the cops in the Peace Officers Fellowship. I was scared. I was just terrified of getting into any kind of treatment. I was terrified that anybody would know. Certainly I figured my job would be at risk. Everybody would know, etc. What happened was the peace officers loved me anyway. Since we've been doing this program, we've got a pretty high success rate. Last year, for example, we put 115 people into programs of rehabilitation, inpatient, outpatient, and self-help programs of rehab. Of that 115, only 14 were connected with discipline. That shows how proactive it's become. That's partners bringing partners in, family members bringing people in, self-referrals coming in, being handled 100% confidentiality. The success rate on our program right now, based on 3 years worth of statistics, is 86.7%, which is ridiculously high. When I get a person into a rehab program, I can wrap them in the warmest blanket they've ever been in their life. People that'll love them the way they are, won't judge them, can relate with them on a personal level, show them how to get clean and sober, and stay clean and sober. It's a great program.
Drug addiction, like many diseases, has no simple cause or cure. A combination of biologic and psychosocial factors bring it about, making its prevention almost impossible unless one never uses alcohol or drugs. However, we do know its symptoms very well, and if we're aware of them in others or ourselves, it's a first step away from self-deception and denial, and a first step toward treatment. We call them the 3 C's: compulsive use, when the drug is taken out of obsessive habit, not desire; loss of control, when a person can no longer predict what will happen to him when he uses his drug of choice; and thirdly, continued use despite the knowledge of adverse consequences, becoming physically ill, behaving irrationally at home and work, and worse. We've seen how the police are now trained to successfully identify the disease in their ranks. In the medical profession, it's a tougher challenge. Because of a doctor's godlike authority, his behavior is seldom questioned. Another factor is his or her exposure and easy access to drugs.
I was in my last year of psychiatry residency in Arkansas. I was using 12 different drugs on a daily basis and had been for about the preceding 2 to 3 years. Cocaine was my drug of choice, intravenous cocaine. I also used marijuana, alcohol, a number of other sedative hypnotics, tranquilizers, narcotics, and even some antihistamines, and basically whatever I could get my hands on.
I think I made the decision to become a doctor when I was in the 8th grade, and this wonderful general practitioner became a very close personal friend, and he was a role model for me. So I found myself, some 30 years later, a successful practicing obstetrician gynecologist. Unlike my role model, I was also an alcoholic and in total denial.
Well, it's very difficult to get doctors to confront each other with the fact that one of them may be in trouble with alcohol or other drugs. They feel, well, he or she has a right to do it, and after all, it's not interfering with their work in any way. He's a fine doctor, and I'll just go and have a talk with him, and you can leave it up to me. We'll look after it. Fatal prescription, because individual confrontation, individual counseling, individual psychotherapy is not the treatment for alcoholism or addiction of any kind. The addict, by definition, is a person who is living secretly, and the treatment fundamentally is to help them come out of that secret life, to help them come out of hiding into the sanctuary of a public place in a treatment center where they can deal with their shame and their guilt and their anguish and their suffering and their remorse and all of the rest of it in the open with other people. We are only as sick as our secrets is a common phrase that's used in the recovery community. We are only as sick as our secrets, which means that we must, in order to recover, divulge the secrets that we harbor inside ourselves, which make us feel so terribly ashamed and alienated from other people.
Ironically, we doctors usually misdiagnose the disease when we have it ourselves. The life and death decisions we make each day, the punishing working hours. Hell, we're under even more stress than anyone. A couple of drinks, a couple of pills, we need them to unwind. But of course, addiction is such an insidious process that even doctors are unable to detect that moment when they cross the invisible line, where drugs no longer bring relief, but now cause only pain. And unless the disease is caught in time, certain death. Dr. Martha Morrison, now treating teenage addicts, is herself in recovery. She started on drugs at age 12 and didn't stop until 27, not only completing medical school, but graduating with honors.
And at the end, I vomited blood. I had horrible GI problems. I lost 50 pounds. I looked like something out of a concentration camp. Yet at that point, I still didn't think I was a drug addict. I mean, I knew I used a lot of drugs, and I knew I had severe problems. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was terminally, malignantly psychotic, schizophrenic, the most terminal personality disorder that you could possibly have. I had periods of catatonic stupor where I would go in and I would just sit on the bottom stair in my house and think about, ruminate, and obsess about all the horrible things that I had done, how awful this was for any human being, let alone a woman, let alone a physician, and how I was responsible for everything, the incredible amount of guilt that I carried, the embarrassment, the shame that I was out of control, but I couldn't tell anybody. And, you know, it never dawned on me that other people might already know, and that I had nowhere to reach out for help. It never dawned on me, quite frankly, to try and reach out for help. And I had just started my last year of psychiatry residency. I had lived for 6 months, suicidal, dysfunctional, one marriage basically destroyed, my family, my friends, increasingly isolated. And actually at this time I was living more out of my car than in any type of home environment. I was using 12 different drugs on a daily basis, including alcohol and marijuana. And 2 men came to me, acting on behalf of the Impaired Physicians Committee, and basically intervened on me and told me that I was going to die if I didn't get the kind of treatment that I needed. My denial was so massive that I denied absolutely everything. And I have never been so terrified, so scared, so dysfunctional in my entire life with nothing to medicate. It was during that time that I first heard really about the disease concept of addiction. And I heard Doug Talbot give a lecture. And I thought it was phenomenal because I thought this man had slides of my life up there, because it was the only thing that I had ever heard that even remotely described what had happened to me.
In talking about the abuser or the problem drinker versus the one that has the disease, I just finished with the medical students, and I told them that of all the diseases this most closely resembles, alcoholism and other drug addictions most closely resembles diabetes. Diabetes is a broken filter disease. The filter in the pancreas is broken to insulin. Alcoholism and drug addiction is a broken filter disease. The filter is broken up here in the inner brain, the ancient brain, to the chemical messengers, the neurotransmitters.
Dr. Talbot, now 70, is a pioneer both in the treatment of the disease and in reaching out to its most resistant victims, doctors themselves. The Talbot Recovery Program in Atlanta is a model for those throughout the country which successfully rehabilitate medical personnel and other professionals in severe denial.
At the height of my career of cardiology, my alcoholism flowered. And at that time, which was almost 25 years ago, there was no place for me to get help. I went to numerous hospitals and psychiatric facilities. None of them seemed to work. And finally, my wife had to have me committed to the state hospital. And I was placed on a locked ward in the state hospital with a number of people. And the inmates of the ward found out I was a physician, and I was very severely verbally and physically abused at that point. And I remember that night in particular because it was raining and I was very, very badly hurt, both physically and emotionally. And I remember saying that if I ever got into recovery, if I ever was able to get well, I'd find a place for the healer to be healed.
I feel like if I can help someone not have to go the route that I went, then maybe it's worth it also. I have some peace of mind today. All I try to do is not drink or not take any drugs on a daily basis and practice a few simple spiritual principles in my life on a daily basis as best I can do.
I was raised in an alcoholic household. I didn't know my father until he got back from the Second World War. I went to a fine medical school. I ended up being drafted during Vietnam and was stationed at Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C. During those years in the service, the amount that I would be drinking would be probably probably 2 quarts a week. There were times it was a lot more than that. There was times that I'd finish a fifth in one night when I wouldn't be working the next day. I realized I was putting on a little weight, and that was denial too. In reality, what was happening was that I only had one pair of pants that fit. They had an elastic band, and I got on the scale once and it said something like 268 pounds, something like that, and I decided I just wouldn't get on the scale again for a while. My daughter, who at this time was in her 20s, she had to move out. It was just too painful. She couldn't stand to see it. Well, I destroyed that practice, and I ended up living down here in Hermosa Beach in an empty examining room in a in a medical office building because I had no place else to go. And I wasn't practicing medicine at all to speak of during these years. It had just become so painful. And on January 3rd, I was admitted here after having had alcoholic convulsions of such severity that I broke my back in 4 places and tore the humeral heads off of both shoulders. And those are my x-rays over there. And that was painful. And I remember that. I woke up strapped to a gurney with my arms over my chest like this on this board for support that the paramedics had put me on. And my wife was leaning over me telling me, "You've had convulsions, you've broken your back in 4 places, and I'm leaving." I laughed. I thought that was hilarious. It was part of the insanity. And that's where the miracle began. It began with that moment of clarity. And I wanted sobriety, and I wanted it bad. I started putting things together, and in the hospital, some other recovering doctors came to call on me, and this is a very important part of my recovery. I met some wonderful people that I became very close with, and it was very important for me to be able to identify with other doctors because I thought I was totally alone. I didn't know that there was another alcoholic doctor around. I thought I was the only one, and I was awful lonely. So today, here I find myself at 50 years of age, being sober for 10 years, and during this period of time, I'd estimate that I've delivered 500 to 600 children. You know, it's a real honor to be present at birth.
There you go.
And you know, it's a real honor for me to be present too when someone gets into recovery, especially another doctor. And when you think about it, that's kind of like a rebirth.
9 years ago, I blacked out at the wheel, sideswiped 2 cars, and totaled mine into a telephone pole. It took that near-fatal episode and the intervention of a loving family and a room full of doctors, recovering addicts, for the light to go on. I'd been hooked on pills and alcohol, had faked out others and myself for 10 years, and didn't realize till then that I was physically ill. I was finally able to admit I had a disease. I spent 32 days in a treatment center, during which time I was detoxed and then began intensive therapy. I was able to return to work 2 months later. Since then, over the past 9 years, I still attend 4 to 5 meetings each week with recovering people from diverse backgrounds. I also meet often with other recovering physicians, not only to maintain my own sobriety, but to share my experience with them as well. And strangely enough, instead of the meetings being a chore, I actually look forward to them. The first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous was held over a half-century ago. Adhering to its 12-step program is still one of the most successful methods of achieving long-term sobriety. But in recent years, we've discovered that most addicted professionals, with their deep-seated denial patterns, will confront the disease more readily before a peer group of recovering addicts. For instance, recovering lawyers and judges sponsor fellow lawyers throughout the country in hundreds of anonymous chapters like The Other Bar. Founded 20 years ago, The Other Bar was the brainchild of Ted Cohn, a Beverly Hills attorney.
The message that we are trying to get across to the public and to the members of the profession is that it is not a shame to have a disease, but it is rather a shame not to do something about it if you have it. So we are trying to bring the disease out of the closet.
My name's Martin Stanley. I'm 34 years old. And I remember when I first got into law school, I wasn't sure that I really wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't know what I wanted to be at the time. I was able to study when I was high on marijuana. I was able to get good grades, and I did very, very well in school. Once I got my degree, I became very lonely, and I started using all kinds of different drugs. I started using LSD. I started using cocaine. I started using, eventually, heroin, Persian heroin. I started smoking it. I used every drug that there was, whatever drug I could get or whatever alcohol I could get that day. From the very first time, I was either psychologically and or physically addicted to all those drugs because they all made me feel better than I felt that I was before. And things got really crazy from there. I started missing court appearances because I couldn't wake up in the morning. I was withdrawing. I couldn't do anything, couldn't function without my drugs. I started performing different scams. I would call other attorneys' answering services late at night, and I would represent myself to be those attorneys, like somebody that advertised on TV or in the Yellow Pages, and I would divert their answering. I would get their answering services to give me their telephone calls, and I would use those. I would call the clients back and have them meet me at some gas station or some restaurant with a few dollars in cash, and I would promise to take their case, which would normally cost 5 or 10 times that much in order to handle, and for this certain fee. And of course, I would never be able to do the work, but I would take that money and get my drugs for the day or for the night, and I just became a thief. I knew the police were after me, and eventually one day while I was in Sears Roebuck writing a check for a TV set so that I could trade for some drugs, I was arrested. And I was arrested. I had about 6 cents on me when I was arrested, and I was thrown into Los Angeles County Jail. And by this time, I was physically really weak. I had lost 30 pounds. I weighed about 135 pounds, and I'm almost 6 feet, and I was in pain on a daily basis. I was sweating, withdrawing. I didn't sleep. While I was in jail, my license was taken away from me by the state bar. I had had about 25 or 30 client complaints, and I was guilty on all of them, on all counts, and I had committed all these criminal offenses, and they rightfully took my license away. And I was lost. I didn't think that I was anything without being a lawyer, or that I was a human being unless I had this title, lawyer, across my chest. And one of the inmates, of course, I had no hope. I had thought that there was no place to recover other than the hospital, 30 days, and then come out and drink like a gentleman. One of the inmates, while I was in jail, mentioned one of the anonymous programs. I walked up these stairs and walked into this room, and there were about 100 to 150 people sitting in this room. There was an older gentleman up on the podium talking at the time, and he was sharing about his alcohol experiences and what he felt and how he didn't have to drink today. And I immediately felt the magic in the room. Here were hundreds of other people that had done the same things that I had done, and I was so lonely, and I felt that I was so alone in this world. And none of them were using today. And eventually I was led to a Wednesday night meeting of quote-unquote the other bar, which is a group of recovering lawyers and judges. And I walked in there, and this was even a closer bond I experienced than when I had walked into just the regular anonymous meeting. And I'm happier today than I ever have been in my entire life. When I had my license, I thought I was a lawyer, and that's all I thought I was. And today, I know I'm a good human being.
A perfect example of the type of recovery that one can make in a lawyer helping lawyer group is that of Marty. And he was removed from the profession because of his misdeeds He has made an amazing recovery. He is helping others. He travels around the country speaking to law students and groups of other lawyers, sharing his experiences with them. And I certainly hope that the profession will recognize the efforts that Marty has made at rehabilitation and restore his license to him at some point in time. In January of 1968, I was sitting in a cell like this at the Los Angeles County Jail, waiting for a bus to take me to prison, to where I had been sentenced for 1 to 14 years for crimes I had committed during my alcoholism. And I could not connect my being in that jail with my drinking. I thought I was in that cell for stealing a few $100s. And I could not connect that up to my alcoholism. But I just knew that if I wasn't willing to take a look at what had got me there, that if I ever did get out, I would be destined to just repeat that drama over and over again. I was partners with a fellow, and we represented most of the clubs and bars along the Sunset Strip, La Cienega area. And every night we would have to go out and mingle with our clientele and bar hop. I still didn't know a lot about drinking. I would have a drink here and there and never paid much attention to it. But that fear of being a kid from the ghetto always was with me. And then one night, I remember it was someone's birthday, and someone poured me a drink of scotch. And it wasn't the first night I'd ever had a drink of scotch, but it was the first night I remember what that scotch did for me when I drank it. I had a drink or two that evening, and you know, after a couple drinks, all this feeling of feeling inferior or feeling inadequate left me. That hole in my gut left me. I had found the magic elixir. And alcohol worked for me for a number of years until it just did not work for me, because at some point I crossed that invisible line into the disease of alcoholism. Now, people around me knew it before I did, of course, because I was the last to know, and that is why it is called the disease of denial. But over the years, I went from a happy-go-lucky, gay social drinker to a mean, ugly, angry, hostile alcoholic. And over the years, I progressed to the point where you could now tell where I lived, because doors were broken and furniture was broken, people were broken, and they would tell me the next day how they had got like that. And then something happened to me that I think every alcoholic gets mileage out of when it happens. Not that we wish for these tragedies, but my 4-year-old son fell out of a window and was killed in a freak accident. And now I had the excuse that an alcoholic needs to really drink with gusto. And now I could go into bars where friendly bartenders who I thought really understood how I felt could pour me doubles. So one day I was sitting around a bar at 10:30 in the morning with a physician and this insurance adjuster, dead drunk. We decided to steal $312 from the State Farm Insurance Company, money which we didn't need because I was a millionaire. At that time, I had a very, very successful law practice. And by the time I had gone into jail, I was drinking about a fifth of scotch a day. It was on July 16th of 1968, I made a telephone call to probably the world's oldest and largest 12-step program, an organization to which I had referred many clients who had problems with alcohol for help. And that was when my life really began all over again. I was taught that my primary purpose was to stay sober, that other things in life really were very secondary, whether I had a wife or a home, a girlfriend, a car, a job, a profession, where I lived, that all those things really didn't matter, that what was important was whether I lived or whether I died. After 3 years, I finally received a notice that my appeals had been turned down, and I was ordered to report to the court to start that 1 to 14-year prison sentence. And then a miracle happened for me. The prosecutor on my case got up and told the judge that he would like to say something, that he had checked up on me and he'd found out that I had been sober for the past 3 years, and I had sort of turned my life around, and I hadn't been running around with the same group of people I had previously. And the judge modified my sentence to where I was ordered to serve 6 months in what they call a work furlough program over in a barracks in East Los Angeles, not too far from where I had grown up. I've learned over the years that one should not judge events as bad or good at the time they are transpiring, because what I thought was a great tragedy for me, such as being sentenced to prison, turned out to be the very catalyst that brought me to sobriety and that brought me a new life.
Addiction specialists are often called upon by medical students to put into words what someone feels like living with the untreated disease. I think as close as we can get is the example described by Dr. O'Connor.
I compare it to many people have been at a party, for example, and have a flu, a gastric flu at the moment, and whether they have diarrhea and terrible stomach cramps, and yet they may be talking to their boss, for example, and all they can think of is this stomach cramp that's occurring in the bottom of their tummy or their abdomen. And then they begin to feel it going further and further down and towards the rear entrance, as it were. And what am I going to do? I'm standing here in a neat skirt or whatever in the middle of this conversation, in the middle of this cocktail party. What in God's name am I going to do? And I have to keep up, nevertheless, the face of function, the face of competence, the face of brilliance, whatever I'm doing, in order to hide the fact that I'm preoccupied with this embarrassment that may occur to me. Now, that is an incidental moment for many people. It is a regular episode and a regular experience for most alcoholics and addicts, who, while they're having a conversation or doing a job of work, can think of nothing but when the next drink will be, or when the next shot will be, when the next fix will be.
One dramatic, often successful technique sometimes used for getting the addict into treatment is the intervention. Families and/or colleagues unite in a surprise confrontation with a loved one or friend. Its primary purpose is to break through the denial and get him or her into treatment.
I mean, there'll be a good chance that he's already had some drinks
When we get there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't sleep through the night. He wakes up in the middle of the night and has a couple of drinks so he can get through the night.
Do you see him bolting out of the room?
Bolting, no, not really. I see him, there could be some anger. Mm-hmm. We've seen more and more of that as his drinking got worse.
I don't know what happens in these, but I mean, this guy's a strong guy. I don't know if he wanted to throw us out.
He may tell us all later.
Mm-hmm. As a professional intervention specialist, in my heart of hearts, I know the man is dying from alcoholism.
These men are talking about their friend Steve, an alcoholic who is close to self-destruction. They are reliving for us what they did less than 1 year ago to save Steve from himself. These friends, some of 20 years, have engaged Ed Storty, an intervention specialist, both to guide them and give them the courage for the surprise assault on Steve's private hell.
The power of a group is amazing. It is amazing how many people will think that there's no hope to motivate someone to go get help. When a group walks in, based off of prepared conversation, knowing that there's a solution, creating action, and that when they walk in there, normally they will get action.
I'd be disappointed from a number of
Action means getting the addict into a clinic or hospital that day. Normally, family members and/or colleagues intervene, but Steve, a once prosperous executive, has neither, only these concerned friends. He's refused to listen to their individual pleas or his doctor's advice. But Ed reassures them he's conducted nearly 3,000 interventions on everyone from doctors to teenagers, and most of them have started treatment.
Are you all okay? You feel okay to go in? Okay, folks, we're going to do it. Watch us. We're going to do it. Let's do it. The intervention procedure, as I view it, sometimes is very much like This Is Your Life by Ralph Edwards. In other words, we're going to bring a group of people in front of that individual, let them know that he or she is loved, cared about, with a solution to take that solution and do it immediately.
Steve, we're obviously been concerned for a long time. We just gotten to a point where we're afraid. We're afraid for you. We're afraid that it's a very difficult thing for you to do. And it scares the hell out of us. It scares the hell out of all of us.
Do you realize you have a drinking problem? You have alcoholism?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of knew that something like this was going to happen. I mean, sooner or later. But, I just figured it's my life. I mean, I can kind of do with it whatever I want, I guess.
I guess, it's frustrating to me, Steve, because I know how much you enjoy things in life. I mean, you get a kick out of things more than most people do, and you got so much to live for. If you could just take the first step today, you know, you'd be started. So that's how I feel.
I'll tell you what, I don't want to go today. I mean, I don't want to go today. There's some things I'd kind of like to take care of, but
We want to see you in the treatment center today, and get over there and go through this, and then see where you are.
I just don't feel like I'm ready to go right now. I was resigned to the disease. You reach a point in this thing where, and I guess I was there, where you can't imagine living without alcohol, and you can't imagine living with it anymore. And that's pretty much where I was.
As expected, Steve initially resisted going to the hospital. It would take 3 hours of the intervention process before he began to believe that he wasn't worthless or hopeless.
Well, you know, from my standpoint, I've got 2 little girls at home that think Uncle Steve is the greatest guy in the world. And they're right. He is. And I'd really like them to be able to enjoy that Uncle Steve for a lot longer. That's real important to me.
A lot of people that love you, Steve. A lot.
I've known Chuck for a long time, and I'm the godfather of one of his children, and I think it became pretty obvious to me and to everybody else that you don't go on with this disease forever. It is progressive, and that there probably was a good chance I wouldn't be around much longer. And you know, from a selfish standpoint, sometimes that's not so bad if you're an alcoholic. But it does affect other people. And that was brought home to me fairly graphically when he started talking about things like his children and stuff like that, things that other people would lose because I wouldn't be there. And it got me in. And I guess that's the spirit of the intervention, is that no matter what it takes, if you can spend some time, you know, just concentrating on your own recovery, you've got a chance. Everybody does.
Steve spent 28 days in intensive treatment. Since then, he attends alcohol recovery meetings regularly. He's been clean and sober for the past 10 months. Fear of flying is still felt by many an air traveler. Rightfully, the public has far more confidence in the highly trained and disciplined pilot than the machine he commands. But the disease of drug addiction, like cancer, doesn't distinguish between job categories. George Steitler was captain of a 747 until his recent retirement. He received a thorough training in the Navy, and like many military pilots, he pursued his love of flying throughout a long career with a commercial airline.
I suppose back in the 30s as a kid, I'd hear the train whistle blowing at night, and I thought, gee, I wonder where that's going. I want to travel. When I get to be a big guy, I want to travel. And aviation was my escape for that, and it was very rewarding. I was able to travel all over the world and do it myself. Being a captain on an airplane is a very rewarding experience.
When I began my psychiatric training, my intention was to be a general psychiatrist and treat all mental disabilities, but I began to focus in on alcoholism because they were among the most fascinating patients. They were action-oriented, intelligent, flamboyant, interesting. That gratified my needs, I think. But also, I could quickly see that they held the highest potential for successful recovery if treated properly. That turned me on. What the pilot dreams as a boy is of flight and of freedom, maybe of poetry, certainly of being a man and of doing a distinguished kind of job. As he then becomes a pilot, some of these dreams are fulfilled, but there are also stresses and obligations. Flight is more restrained than he thought it would be. There are now growing family pressures. There are corporate pressures.
And as I grew older, I suppose I drank less because it took less to put me where I wanted to be. And where I wanted to be was a feeling of release. I just wanted to relax. And yet, when I was at work, I was relaxed. When I was home, I didn't seem to be. I was always charged up. And booze would do it. It would do it for a while, and then I just float right through that point and wind up passed out again, or wind up being not the kind of guy that I was brought up to be. I would lose my, I don't know, I guess we all are brought up with a code, kind of a moral code that you taught as a kid, and I would lose this when I would drink. I wouldn't steal, but I might cheat. I would cheat on my wife. I would do things that I ordinarily wouldn't do when I was under the influence. I suppose I lost my self-respect. We had one daughter, and I guess my heavy drinking started when she was probably in 7th grade, and it continued right on through her graduation from high school. And I missed a lot. Now that I look back, I didn't realize that it affected her the way it did. She too became an alcoholic. Now, whether this is environment or whether it's genes, I don't know. But I know that she became an alcoholic, and she got into a 12-step program a week before I did, which was fantastic. And she has been sober ever since.
When it comes to hitting bottom, alcoholics like doctors, lawyers, policemen, and so on, they hit bottom much lower and they get much sicker because there is no system in place, as there is with pilots, where the disease is diagnosed earlier and where treatment can be instituted right away, and most importantly, where they can be restored to the same job.
I had to do something about it. I called our union rep, I called my local flight surgeon. They got a hold of the company, and the first thing they said to me was that we're going to put you in a program, and the second thing was that job would be open for you when you came back, if you still wanted it, which certainly did a lot for me inside. I mean, I was whipped. When I went to the recovery program, I was frightened. I haven't been frightened too much in my life. No question about it. At times I have been. But I was scared with this. I was scared, number one, that I wouldn't get my license back. I was scared, number two, that I might not make it. The day that I asked for help, I was given the help. I was given the guidance of where to go. And I said to myself, I'm going to take these directions no matter what, because I want to get this off my back. I want to come out of here as clean as can be. After I came back to work, it was another almost 20 months that I was monitored by the psychiatrist, the union representative, my supervisor, and the company EAP. And this is done with a monthly check-in, or every couple of weeks I would go in and see, and we would just discuss how my progress was. And what they were mainly interested in was, did I take a drink? And I did not take a drink, and I had no reason to, I had no desire to. At the end of 2 years, just precisely 2 years from the time that I entered the program, I was fully reinstated. I was able to complete my last 5 years clean and sober, the whole 5 years, and then I retired. I've never had any real problems in the air. Flying has been the most safe facet of my entire life. Up there, it is just fantastic, the freedom. After flying, there's always a bit of a letdown. And I suppose I tried to get that out of the jug. And that's the stuff that almost killed me.
For the last hour, we've seen and heard recovering addicts, myself included, relate horror stories which miraculously have happy endings, at least for today. One day at a time, as we say in the recovery community. We also say that chemical dependency is the most treatable, untreated disease in our culture, yet don't have to die from it. And if it's caught early rather than late, families and other loved ones don't have to be destroyed either. I urge all of you to whom this program has been directed to believe what you've heard. And if you feel it relates to your life, take action, reach out. Virtually every community in the country has an Alcoholics Anonymous program listed in the phone book. There are nearly 8,000 clinics and hospitals specializing in rehabilitation, offering inpatient and outpatient programs. Cost shouldn't be a prime consideration. If your insurance doesn't cover the charges, there are a wide range of alternative means to get proper help. Then there are trained intervention specialists who, with your caring help, can often get even the most resistant, denying addict into a treatment center. The disease of alcohol and drug addiction brilliantly disguises itself, but if it can be unmasked in time, it can be successfully arrested. A full, rich life is possible for anyone who wants out of his or her dark, secret world. If you wish to have others see this program, it's available on home video cassette. Included with it is a detailed resource guide with information on how to contact experienced people who can help with your particular questions.
My life today is clean. I have no secrets in my life anymore.
If you need help, seek the help, and then you won't be in the same boat that we're in.
There's life, there's happiness, freedom, and joy after drugs, in recovery.
There was no one there for me when I needed help. And if there's anything I can do to help another doctor, I want to do that.
I have a really good life today, and I owe it to the program that I'm involved in, and it works.
The day that I asked for help, I was given the help. I was given the guidance of where to go.
The only thing that I can say is that there's hope for everybody. There really is.
If you think you or someone you know needs help, call any of these toll-free national 800 numbers. You immediately will be directed to someone in your area who can guide you.